Okay, Snow White's now a month away from coming out. The marketing for the movie's been ramping up, and we're getting close enough to the release date that we're starting to get some actual box office projections for this movie. Now, if you've been following the production for this movie at all, then I'm sure you would know that this movie's been quite a PR nightmare for Disney. There have been some interviews from the star of the movie, Rachel Zegler, where she's made a lot of statements that have angered fans. You might already know about them. She called the prince a stalker. She said that the original Disney Snow White was dated. She's talked about how Disney's going to be updating Snow White for modern audiences. Snow White and Gal Gadot have said several times in interviews that Snow White is not going to be getting saved by a prince in this movie because it's not politically correct to have a woman be rescued by a man in today's day and age. That would be toxic masculinity. That would be problematic. There was an election last November, and after the election, Rachel Zegler went online and she wished that a majority of the country would never know peace. And she's made other statements in the past that a lot of people do not like. Yeah, if you've been following the production for Snow White, you probably know a lot of this stuff. Disney keeps putting out some new ads for Snow White. I could talk about how in the comments everybody is saying that they're rooting for Gal Gadot to win or they're rooting for the evil queen to win. But at this point, I don't think I'm going to bother. So what do we have lately on Snow White? I guess there's this from That Park Place. Disney appears to change Rachel Zegler's skin color in Snow White international poster to make her look white. And why is this a headline? Well, because Rachel Zegler is Colombian and Snow White is a European, German-based fairy tale. So when Rachel Zegler was first cast, a lot of people thought it didn't quite make sense. Snow White's described as having skin white as snow, and so because of context, it would make sense that Snow White would be played by, a European, or maybe a German woman. But anyway, this is the poster here where they are saying that Disney appears to be changing Rachel Zegler's skin color, which, I don't know, you might say that this image is just bright. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know, you decide that for yourself. Okay, but I'll give you this headline. This is from Deadline. Snow White hits long lead tracking. Will live action take of Disney classic Whistle a Happy Tune box office forecast? Yeah, we're getting close enough to release that we're starting to get some box office projections. Disney's long-awaited live-action reboot of its 1937 animated classic Snow White doesn't open until March 21st. However, box office forecasts are out on the Rachel Zegler Gal Gadot starring movie. Quorum reports a 3-day start for the Mark Webb-directed movie of $63 to $70 million, while other sources believe $65 million at this point in time is fair. As a comparison, the 2014 Angelina Jolie Sleeping Beauty live-action spin-off opened to $69.4 million back in early summer 2014. At that level, it would represent the highest domestic opening for the Golden Globe-winning Zegler, whose Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds, and Snakes ranks as the actress' best opening at the box office with $44.6 million. Okay, well first, highest domestic opening for a Rachel Zegler movie, that doesn't say a whole lot. Now when they're saying this $63 to $70 million, I think that's just domestic. So add the worldwide box office and the total number will be more than this, but I'll jump back to That Park Place here. Let's do a comparison to some other Disney live action movies. The numbers for the Snow White projection look even worse when compared to other Disney live-action remakes. The Little Mermaid opened to $95.6 million domestically over 3 days and was still considered a financial disappointment. Disney's The Lion King 2019 debuted with $191.77 million, and Beauty and the Beast 2017 earned $174.7 million, both surpassing $1 billion globally. By contrast, these Snow White box office projections place it closer to Maleficent 2014, which opened at $69.4 million and managed to reach $758.5 million worldwide, though its sequel failed to turn a profit. So yeah, by comparison, Snow White, its box office projection for its opening weekend is not as good as previous live-action Disney movies. Now its opening weekend's projected to be about the same as Maleficent, which that movie made $750 million, but that movie came out in 2014. Came out over 10 years ago. That was basically the start of all these live-action remakes. The most recent Disney live-action remake, Little Mermaid, or at least the most recent fairy tale live-action remake, Little Mermaid only made a little over $500 million. You compare that to previous live-action remakes, which were, a lot of them, making over $1 billion. Definitely making more than this. And Snow White, yeah, there's a PR firestorm around that movie. There's been a PR firestorm around it for the past, what, year and a half, 2 years? I mean, let's be real here. I think we're all predicting that this movie's gonna flop. This $63 to $70 million projection for the opening weekend, I mean, it's gonna drop off after that. You know, movies usually make most of their money on the opening weekend. That's usually the best weekend that they have in their theatrical run. So yeah, this projection doesn't look very good for the movie. Awareness is solid among women over and under 35. Wait a minute, what? Awareness is solid among women over and under 35? It's solid for women over 35 and under 35? I think you could just write that awareness is solid among women here. In regards to those who are willing to pay to see the movie in a theater, women under 35 are first, followed by women over 35, and then men under 35 per quorum. Yeah, I'm not planning on seeing this movie. I'll skip ahead and I'll just read this little part. Snow White was originally scheduled to come out March 22nd, 2024, before it was pushed an entire year. Out of the gate during production, Snow White was dogged by headlines over Rachel Zegler's candid statements about the original film. Yeah, again, she called the prince a stalker. She said the original Snow White was dated. She insulted the original classic Snow White, which has a lot of fans, and people did not like that. She was talking about how Snow White, she's not going to be saved by a prince. Instead, she's going to be a strong, fierce girl boss leader, and people do not like the direction that Disney's taken with this movie. And the opinion I've always had on the 1-year delay is that the reason cited was the actor strikes, which, sure, that could have been a big factor, but at the same time, I'm also thinking the movie was such a PR nightmare for Disney that behind closed doors, I was thinking Disney had to have been hoping that a 1-year delay would give it time for some people to soften their stance on Rachel Zegler, because a lot of people don't like her. They had to have been hoping that a 1-year delay would cool the temperature down, because there was so much backlash over all the things Rachel Zegler said and the direction of this modern Snow White. Disney had to have been hoping that a 1-year delay would give it some time for at least some people to forget about all that stuff. But I tell you folks, whenever you look at trailers for the Snow White movie, you read comments, you look at the ratios, like to dislike ratios, yeah, nobody's forgotten. And here, according to Forbes, Snow White had ballooned its budget, its production budget, to $270 million by the end of 2023. I mean, that's enormous. And there's been word that this movie's done some reshoots, which, yeah, that's going to really drive your production budget up. Here at World of Real, Snow White budget is probably well over $300 million, but there's also rumor that the budget is as much as about $500 million, $500 million, after all the reshoots and stuff. Regardless, this movie's got an enormous production budget, and the higher the production budget is, the more money you're going to have to make in theaters in order to break even. I mean, if the budget is $500 million, then you're talking this movie would have to make well over $1 billion in order to break even. Probably like 1.2 or $1.3 billion, something like that. A movie that's been an absolute PR nightmare for Disney. A movie that's had an enormous amount of backlash from fans. A movie starring someone who many people are finding to be quite unlikable. And an adaptation that's going to be updated for modern audiences, which that's caused quite a bit of backlash from fans. Between all of that, and the movie having a pretty high production budget, this movie has basically no chance of turning a profit. And the early box office projections for Snow White's opening weekend, $63 to $70 million domestically, yeah, that's not going to cut it. If it does make somewhere in that range, well, it's going to have a really good word of mouth in order to give the movie longer legs for its theatrical run. But yeah, if you look at all the promotions for this movie and you look at the reception, nah, I don't think that's going to happen. I think this movie's going to flop, and I think basically everyone out there thinks that. Bye, everyone.